Starting off this countdown, we have the Buddhist Exorcism.
破壊してはあなた自身も幸せになれないのだと。今住んでる人たちのことも考えてほしいと、マダム・ローレンが今言ってる、ウォーレンが。わかる？
In the early 2000s, the Warrens took a trip to Japan to check out these haunted tunnels that a number of people have died in. But while they were there, they were contacted to perform an exorcism on a woman named Teresa. This footage is very creepy. Not only is it actual footage of someone that is possessed, but you can also hear the demon in her voice reaching out to talk to Lorraine. In this clip I'm about to show you, Lorraine is trying to reach out to Teresa and get her to fight back against the demon possessing her.
Hear me? Teresa, you hear me. You understand me. Teresa, leave. Leave, Teresa. Leave, dear. Leave. I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you, Teresa.
Things take a turn when Teresa starts speaking in English to Lorraine. I should note that Teresa didn't know English, so clearly it was the demon speaking.
You see your mother? Go with your mother, Teresa. Go with your mother.
Go with your mother.
Go with your mother.
See your mother?
Do you see your mother?
Yeah. Go with her.
She sees her.
Towards the end of the exorcism, Teresa starts lashing out towards Lorraine and others. We see her crawling around and growling like a demon and talking all raspy.
I was here before.
I guess the demon was really fighting back because poor Teresa was going through a lot at this point. The footage ends with Lorraine once again telling Teresa to fight back against the demon. Hopefully they managed to complete this exorcism successfully. Now, I tried to Google this case, but unfortunately there wasn't much information out there on it, so we may never know. In fact, it was after this trip in Japan where Ed got really sick and his health started to decline. Maybe this demon had something to do with it. Moving on to number 4, we have Scotland's underground city. And if you guys are liking this video so far, then why don't you hit that like button?
And today, there still are.
They're still haunted.
Yes. There are people like you that see them. But I've never seen them, but there are people that see these ghosts floating about. Mary King's been seen up here, and she's been seen down at the bottom.
In 1996, Ed and Lorraine Warren visited Edinburgh in Scotland to investigate an underground city. The city was said to be haunted. In the video, you see an older tour guide telling them about the history of this underground city, how there used to be underground shops and stuff like that down there. At one point, he talked about getting bad vibes from being down there, and apparently Lorraine was sensing that as well.
So that's when you get the funny feeling.
I got funny feeling, all right.
However,
very bad feeling.
One by one, they all died off until there was nobody left.
It gets worse when he talks about how everyone died down there and there were just piles of bodies because there was no one left to get rid of them. Which is probably why the place is haunted. I mean, a number of people died there and didn't have a proper burial. Well, at one point in the video, Lorraine claims she hears a ghost walking by.
Can't be.
No.
What are you hearing?
Like the sound of people, of more than one person together walking by, and, you know, like heavy clothing rubbing against each other, that type of thing I could hear.
I'm going home.
And I could hear that, and I wondered, you looked, Frank, so I thought you heard the same thing.
No, I didn't hear it.
Yeah.
That's not all. She started to pick up on another vibe.
It feels like somebody is like squeezing your insides all together, actually. Squeezing the life right out of you.
I have no clue how she wasn't scared to death experiencing all of that. Honestly, she was brave. It blows my mind. In our third spot today, we have the family in Connecticut. And no, this isn't the same as the family from the haunting in Connecticut case. Just apparently, Connecticut has a lot of hauntings. So basically, Ed and Lorraine Warren went to Connecticut to help a family whose home was being haunted by a spirit. What I'm about to show you is real footage from this case. Basically, it starts with Ed and Lorraine sitting at a table praying with the family. Then, Ed tries to make contact with whatever is haunting their house.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come.
One knock for yes, two for no. Are you a man? Are you a boy? One knock for yes, two for no. Yes. Okay.
Using that one knock for yes, two knocks for no method, Ed was able to find out more about this ghost.
Most here is it? Is it?
So the ghost was haunting their home and causing a scene because it didn't like the family's mother. But that's not the only ghostly thing that they managed to capture on camera. Later on, Ed asked the ghost to give them a sign, and then the kitchen chair moves on its own.
Give me some sign. Is that you moving something? Give me some sign that you're here. I command you to reveal your identity.
Yeah, no thank you. If that happened at my house, I would be out of there so fast. In our second spot, we have Maurice Theriault. If you've seen the movie The Nun, then you already know about a man named Maurice, or Frenchie. This guy was a hard-working farmer that ended up getting diabolically possessed. This occurred in 1985. Sometimes blood would randomly pour out of his body, like from his nose, eyes, and mouth. And he didn't know what was causing it. He also developed super strength and could randomly understand and speak Latin. At first, he went to the police for help, then a priest, and then finally Ed and Lorraine Warren agreed to help him. Now, he apparently went through a number of exorcisms. The footage I'm going to share with you is from his last exorcism. So the footage starts off with Ed asking Frenchie to lift up his shirt. Apparently, random crosses would show up engraved in his skin.
The front. See it up in the shoulder? Yeah. Move, yeah, you're in the way, right? Yeah. Okay.
It literally looks like somebody took something sharp and carved crosses into him, and then it scarred up. But those would appear all over his body, randomly appearing and disappearing. During this exorcism, a number of scary things happened. For starters, we see him drooling from his mouth, but as soon as the drool hits his shirt, it turns to blood. Then, at one point, we see Frenchie hunched over in pain. This is apparently because spirits enter people through their solar plexus. And then at another point, we see Frenchie become incredibly still and his face changes completely. He doesn't look like himself. His eyes look so glossy. And lastly, we see a cut randomly appear on his forehead and start to bleed on its own, out of nowhere. That is absolutely horrifying. And in our number one spot, we have the unseen tapes. YouTuber Haley Reese got the chance to actually meet up with Tony Spira, the husband of Judy Warren. He provided her with insight into the Warren cases and actually showed her some unseen exorcism footage. She then uploaded this onto YouTube. In this video, we see Tony and Lorraine Warren performing an exorcism on a man named Roberto. Take a look at it.
This is the power, Jesus Christ. Okay? You hear me? Jesus Christ has all the power. You have none. What is your name?
So in the video, as you just saw, they're trying to find out this demon's name to then help expel it. And guys, you're not gonna believe what demon was inside of him. Here, continue watching.
What is your name?
Jesus Christ commanded you to answer that question.
What is your
What
name?
is your name? Beelzebub? Is that what you're saying? Beelzebub?
This dude was possessed by Beelzebub. When I heard that, I literally got shivers down my spine. Like, holy. So for those of you that don't know, in Christian texts, the name Beelzebub is often associated with the devil himself. They would alternate between using this name and Satan. He is considered one of the 7 princes of hell, and he is associated with the sin of gluttony. In other texts, he is described as the lieutenant of hell. He's second in power to Satan. It's crazy, but hold on. He wasn't just possessed by Beelzebub, but by other entities as well.
What other entity is inside you? God is commanding you. In the name of Jesus Christ, and all the saints, and all the martyrs, and all the angels command you to answer that question. What is it? Abaddon.
I genuinely don't know how they stayed so calm as this dude lists all the demons possessing him. The video went on and they found at least 4 demons were inside of him. They then asked the demons why they were possessing Roberto, and they replied with power.
Why are you in Roberto? Why are you there with Roberto? Jesus Christ doesn't like demonic spirits within a human spirit. Jesus Christ hates demonic spirits to be within a human being. You know that? You hate Jesus, huh?
I don't know about you, but that creeped me out. It is terrifying.
Number 5, their relationship. Now the movies portray Ed and Lorraine Warren as a perfect couple, a pair of demonologist ghost hunters that nothing could possibly stand between. No demons, no spirits, no troubles in the marriage. Well, in reality, there are claims, pretty substantial ones, that the relationship wasn't quite as picturesque as the movies made it out to be. The pair lived with a girl named Judith Penny, someone who is notably absent through the movies. Judith later in life revealed some truly shocking secrets and allegations against the pair. She suggested that Ed acted violently to Lorraine behind closed doors and claims that on more than one occasion he struck her. Penny said in a recording to The Hollywood Reporter, "Some nights I thought they might end each other's lives." Of course, the Conjuring movies are nothing like that, and portray them as a fairy tale storybook couple almost. It's a very stark contrast. The production company was strong-armed into showing the couple as loving as possible in a deal by Lorraine Warren for the films after Ed had passed away. A producer for the Conjuring films, Tony DeRosa Grund, spoke out against Ed Warren in an email to top Warner Brothers executives, referring to him as a violent husband and a criminal. He said, "Lorraine enabled, she knowingly allowed an illegal relationship to continue for 40 years. They lied to the public." Now we've got lots of videos on Ed and Lorraine Warren, whether you're a fan or a hater. We've got lots on the topic. But if that's not your jam, we've got cryptids, conspiracies, true crime, fake crime, aliens, pretty much anything scary under the sun. Top 5 Scary's got a video for. So click on through, find something to scream at, and subscribe, but do that when the credits roll, okay? We worked hard on this video. Number 4, Judith Penny. Perhaps the most serious claim regarding the pair had nothing to do with ghosts or spirits, but it was the nature of the relationship with Judith Penny and Ed Warren. In 2017, evidence surfaced from Judith herself to suggest that the movies left out one of the biggest details of their lives, that Ed Warren was involved in an extramarital relationship with an underage girl. Judith has sworn that she spent 4 decades living in the Warrens' house as Ed's lover, but that the relationship began when she was 15. The claim goes on to state that the couple told people she was their niece or a poor girl that they had taken in since she had nowhere else to go. In 1963 actually, Penny was arrested and taken into custody after a concerned citizen who noticed this reported the nature of their relationship to local police. She was ordered by the court to attend a delinquent youth office for a month. Penny would tell that Ed would pick her up from school and drive her to these meetings. Now obviously these are substantial claims and serious allegations. These didn't come out until after Ed had passed, but perhaps the most concerning piece of evidence was a bizarre contract Lorraine demanded that New Line Cinema follow. This strange deal insisted that Lorraine serve as a consultant on all of the films, which makes sense, they're about her. Where it gets a bit odd is restrictions that said the films could not show the Warren characters engaging in any criminal acts, could not show Ed Warren committing any extramarital acts, or romantically involved with younger people. Very suspicious. One executive at New Line said they had never seen a deal like that before in their career. It certainly raises a very uncomfortable question: why would these things specifically be demanded not to be done? Number 3, the skeptical society. I think a little healthy skepticism is good for all of us, even on a paranormal channel. I watch paranormal stuff every single day of my life, but I like to approach it from a skeptical angle. What can I say? I'm more of a Scully than I am a Mulder. The New England Society for Paranormal Research isn't the only group in New England that was involved with the Warrens. Enter the New England Skeptical Society, existing as a bit of a rival to the Warrens. The Skeptical Society existed to uphold the tenets of science and reason versus paranormal speculation. The founder, one Stephen Novello, was a prominent neurologist and professor at Yale School of Medicine, and he did not think particularly highly of the Warrens. He was quoted saying, "You meet them and oh my god, you realize the guy had no idea what he was doing, didn't know the first thing about anything relevant to paranormal investigation or ghost phenomena." He was adamantly not a fan of the Warrens at all, even going so far as to decry their museum of the occult and cursed objects, referring to it as little more than off-the-shelf Halloween junk, dolls, and toys. Now, the Warrens refused to allow the Skeptical Society to shadow them on a case or investigation numerous times, apparently, with various excuses each time. When sufficiently questioned about it, Ed Warren responded, "You can't have scientific evidence for a spiritual phenomenon." An outright investigation by the society printed in a newspaper read, "The Warrens claim to have scientific evidence which does indeed prove the existence of ghosts," which sounds like a feasible claim into which we can sink our investigative teeth. Now, what we found was a nice couple. Some sincere people, but absolutely no compelling evidence. Number 2, the White Lady Ghost. Continuing on with the Skeptical Society, the frequent detractor of the Warrens, many critics of the Warrens have noted their consistent lack of evidence for their cases. They've got a museum of cursed objects and haunted relics, but they don't seem to have any actual hard evidence of ghosts. The most prominent bit of evidence that they've ever put forward was a photo from the Amityville horror case allegedly depicting a ghost descending a staircase, but there is a lot of evidence to suggest the Amityville case was a fraud as a whole, and should probably be questioned reasonably. One infamous ghost Ed Warren claimed to have seen was that of the White Lady Ghost, a ghost dressed in all white that haunted the Union Cemetery. Stephen Novello repeatedly questioned Ed, saying that if they had this video footage of a ghost somewhere, that it doesn't make sense why you wouldn't release that footage publicly to silence any critics or doubters. Eventually, Stephen was invited to the Warrens' home to watch the tape and was sufficiently unimpressed. Why don't you take a little listen to his review after watching the clip. The piece de resistance of the museum is Ed's video of the White Lady of Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut. We've only been allowed to view this tape in the Warrens' home because Ed refused to give it to us to analyze, a common theme in our investigations. The tape shows a white human figure moving behind some tombstones. Like videos of UFOs, Bigfoot, and the Loch Ness Monster, the figure is at the perfect distance and resolution so that a provocative shape can be seen, but no details which would aid identification. Ed Warren has not investigated this video with any rigor and refuses to allow others to do so. Despite Ed's insistence that he was engaged in research, he continued to jealously hoard his evidence rather than allow it to be analyzed. Now, detractors like Novella have suggested that the footage in question has been faked and it was just someone in a sheet. This footage actually is available now. After decades and decades of just talking about it, you can see the footage for yourself. It's available now on their son-in-law's personal YouTube channel after Ed had passed, and I will admit it is a bit blurry. It is kind of hard to make out anything. Number 1, the Amityville hoax. Now, besides The Conjuring, one of the biggest cases the Warrens were ever involved in was the Amityville horror. Before the Conjuring cinematic universe kicked off and they made 3 Annabelle movies, they were making films and books about the Amityville story. It gripped America as it was a truly bizarre, haunting case. Well, except for the fact that there seems like there's a big pile of evidence to suggest the case was greatly exaggerated for the cameras and media. The book was a bestseller, and the movie was a hit, but take a listen to some smaller inaccuracies. For one, the Lutz claimed that they found demonic footprints in the snow, but weather records around the time of the incident showed there was no snowfall. The book and the film also both refer to police being called to the house, but no records show that police were ever contacted during this time. Perhaps most incriminating is William Weber, who is the attorney for Ronald DeFeo, has claimed multiple times that the entire story was all a hoax collaboratively created between the Lutz family, novelist Jay Anson, and the Warrens. This wouldn't even be the first time it seemed like the Warrens were more interested in a good story than the truth. The Haunting in Connecticut story was written into a non-fiction novel by Ray Garton, a horror novelist who was commissioned by the Warrens to tell the story. He claims that he found the experience very frustrating as an author because while he was trying to report on the story, the Snedeker family involved in the case could not keep their details straight and were providing several conflicting stories. He pressed Ed Warren on it, and Ed told him, "They're crazy. All the people who come to us are crazy, that's why they come to us. Just use what you can and make the rest up. You write scary books, right? Well, just make it up and make it scary. That's why we hired you." Number 5. Annabelle. Well, it wouldn't quite be a video about the Warrens without Annabelle. Do you ever wonder, did they ever thank her for all the good publicity she gave them over the years? Now, by now, I'm sure all of you are very familiar with the tale of Annabelle, the haunted doll that Ed and Lorraine kept captive, and probably the most famous case the two of them were involved in. They say that the Amityville Horror was their most famous case, but they made 3 spin-off movies just about Annabelle, so she's pretty big shakes. It was given to a nursing student as a gift from her mother, and within days it turned bad. Notes would appear around the house, scrawled in blood, that read out terrifying messages like, "Help me." It allegedly lunged at the girl's boyfriend one night, grabbing him by the neck. And after that, Ed and Lorraine were called in. I mean, as soon as a toy in your apartment starts trying to choke you out, yeah, definitely get some outside help. They called in to help exorcise the demon inside Annabelle. Now, in the end, they kept her locked up tight, surrounded by rosaries and holy water to ensure the demon inside can't harm anyone anymore. Now, while the stories inspired by Annabelle have gone on to big, great things, and the fictional Annabelle has enjoyed quite the career as a movie star, the real Annabelle is still locked away to keep that evil dormant. In this recently released footage, we're treated to some up-close and personal glamour shots of Annabelle in the flesh, or stuffing, maybe? Locked tight behind her cage. And this footage comes to us from Tony Spera, the son-in-law of Ed and Lorraine, who's taken it upon himself to maintain their legacy on his YouTube channel. If you're a big Ed and Lorraine fan, go check it out, because there's hours and hours of stuff to work through. He takes us on a brief tour of the museum, but gets up close and personal with Annabelle herself. Even through a YouTube screen, you can almost feel some evil energy radiating off this doll. Now, sadly, the Warrens Museum of the Occult is currently closed, so you can't visit Annabelle right now, but they're hoping to reopen it one day soon, so Annabelle can get back to scaring her fans in person like she always has. She makes convention appearances, did you know that? She just recently was at the Warrens Paracon, the convention dedicated to supernatural hunters of the unknown. I'm not sure if I personally would take a selfie with Annabelle. I wouldn't want to ruin her photo like that, unless I could guarantee she'd look really good. I don't want to offend her in any way. I try not to upset any cursed dolls. And if you're looking for way more stories about Ed and Lorraine Warren, true tales of terror, fake fibs of fright, ghouls, goblins, cryptids, aliens, true crime, basically everything scary under the sun and above it, Top 5 Scary is the only place to be. Stay subscribed, stay scared, and don't miss a thing. But let's keep going, because we got a whole lot more video to go through. Number 4. Under Scotland. Now, the Warrens' investigations did not just take them on road trips all over the United States. Now, the Warrens might have visited a case in almost every state and then some. The Warrens' journey saw them traveling all over the globe in an effort to uncover truths and combat evil wherever it was found. In this recently posted footage, we get to see a unique perspective from the Warrens, focusing on Lorraine Warren digging around underground in the secret vaults beneath Edinburgh. Under the ground is a series of large cavernous vaults that were once used as a storage space for merchants, but when abandoned became home to Edinburgh's lowest and poorest, who began to make it their dwellings. Probably really nice, what with no daylight, musty air, a thriving rodent population, and Hey, for the right price, that honestly sounds better than most apartments in Toronto. Because of this, the vaults were the perfect place to conduct a little nefarious business, if you know what I mean. You know, all sorts of nasty crimes that aren't fit to discuss on YouTube. It's believed that 2 of Edinburgh's most prolific criminals hid bodies here before taking them to medical schools to sell off. So, because of its grim history, it's no surprise that people believe the vaults to be haunted, claiming they feel watched or touched when walking through them. So when supernatural weirdness happens, the Warrens are soon to follow. This one's actually pretty cool. It's kind of like going on a ghost tour from your own home. First person, making you feel like you're exploring those subterranean depths with her. The real highlight though is the guide, who's this very geriatric Scottish man who seems to know the tunnels very well. If I ever take this tour, I need to insist on my guide being an old Scottish man who I almost can't understand. That seems like the most appropriate and trustworthy way to go ghost hunting. Now, they didn't find anything too much on this investigation, but while in there, Lorraine claims that she can feel something communicating with her long ago. Could it just be the spirits from long ago, or radio feedback? Let me know in the comments. Number 3, the Donovan Poltergeist. Now, our next entry is going to cover the Donovan Poltergeist, an often forgotten case in the Ed and Lorraine Warren oeuvre. In this clip, moderator Tony Spera, he's coming up a lot in this video, mentions that Ed has told him that on a scale of 1 to 10 for demonic intensity, I love that you can rank demonic intensity like that, the Warrens found this case to be a 10. Now, I gotta ask, if it's so intense, I wonder why it's not more well known, but maybe they're keeping it hush hush because this is going to be the plot of Conjuring 4, so I'm giving you the spoilers right now. The Donovan Poltergeist case was in West Hartford, Connecticut, when a young girl had come into possession of a Ouija board, one of the most haunted Hasbro products ever released, alongside the game Sorry. Ed briefly talks about how people can be so dismissive of Ouija boards. I mean, imagine who would be so dismissive of Ouija boards. Don't know anybody like that. And Ed mentions that although they may seem innocent and unbecoming like a children's toy, a Ouija board is an invitation for spirits to come and disrupt. The girl in question in the Donovan case asked the Ouija board all sorts of questions and started to get answers that only a spirit could give. Ed says that the spirit needed something in return, and afterwards her house started to become rabid. Objects thrashed around, levitating, so on. Ed describes a violent interaction with a poltergeist, claiming that at one point during their investigation, he found himself literally pinned to the wall by a malevolent spirit. He describes as well the house being pelted with rocks from the sky and objects vanishing. Imagine the size of the umbrella you would need if it's raining rocks. This definitely sounds pretty extreme, all things considered. They claim that they would watch things dematerialize in front of their very own eyes, as if Mr. Scott was teleporting them away on the Star Trek transporter. Now, eventually, Ed describes getting in contact with a priest to perform an exorcism on the cursed house, freeing the family from spectral torment. And stay tuned to see if that's going to be the plot for Conjuring 4. I'm almost pretty sure. Number 2, the Japanese tunnels. Among the many accolades and achievement in his career before he was a ghost hunter, Ed Warren was a veteran of the US Navy and served in the Second World War and spent a good amount of time stationed around Japan. As such, from a young age, he developed an interest in Japanese folklore and the yokai and spirits that go with it. So naturally, they had to take a trip out east to go investigate some spirits there. They took a trip to Nagoya to investigate an apartment building that allegedly was being haunted by the floating head of an ancient samurai warrior. That's unnerving. I've heard of headless ghosts. I've even heard of nearly headless ghosts. But I think this is the first time I've heard of a ghost that was just a head. I think that honestly might be way scarier, just seeing a head like floating around down a hallway, but that's just me. Now, this wasn't the sole focus of their journeys though. They had more going on. The two of them also sought out an exploration of Japan's haunted tunnels, a tunnel where 200 people were allegedly buried alive after an avalanche during a typhoon trapped some 200 souls inside and made the tunnel their grave. Local reports would claim that the people would hear the screams of the damned late at night. So Ed and Lorraine visited it, and they both said it was terrifying and claimed that walking through it was freezing, the coldest thing either of them had ever experienced. Ed said a bitter cold came over him as he reached the end. He relays as well a story of a young man who tried to challenge his fear of the supernatural and ride a motorcycle right through this tunnel, but paid for it with his life and crashed. Now, for what it's worth, you know I love playing skeptic around here. You know I love getting my Scully on. I'm more of a Scully than I am a Mulder. I think this might be more of an urban legend because I did do a lot of digging for this video and I could not find any confirmed stories of a mass death inside a tunnel in Japan from an avalanche, but it's possible that it could be lost to time, very ancient, maybe records get lost, but nonetheless, interesting to listen to. And number 1, the Amityville interview. Now, the Warrens argued that the most famous case they ever worked on was the Amityville Amityville horror, and there's no denying that when this case happened, it gripped the American public. In 1973, Ronald DeFeo took a hunting rifle and went one by one, ending the lives of each one of his family members remorselessly while they slept. He would later go on to claim that he was being commanded to do it. He was compelled by spirits to act this way. A little bit later, a new family, the Lutzes, moved into the Amityville house, aware of what had transpired, but moving forward with it anyway. It's just such a good deal on rent. You gotta take it where you can get it. In this recently released footage, we hear from Ed and Lorraine speaking in great detail about their experiences working on the infamous legendary case on their TV program Seekers of the Supernatural with the Warrens. Lorraine outlines how immediately upon walking in she felt stepping into the house. She felt immediately wrong. She reiterates that upon entering, she felt a great unnerving presence. She says pretty much as soon as she entered the sewing room, she turned to the homeowner and said, "I hope this is as close to hell as I get." That's raw. The sewing room allegedly is where a focus of the haunting was, where the hundreds of flies apparated, where the spectral voices were heard telling people to get out. They speak as well of how they brought a reverend with them in the investigation who felt a physical slap in his face walking in. And if you're looking for more details about the Amityville case, the movie from the 70s and the movie with Ryan Reynolds, both pretty good retellings of the story. Ed goes on to address allegations that the Amityville case was a hoax, saying he offered a $3,000 reward for anyone who could prove to him that it was faked. Later in life, the lawyer representing Ronald DeFeo claims that the entire haunting story was a concoction he made up with the Lutzes over a bottle of wine in an effort to get a retrial for his client and drum up a bit of book business for the Lutzes. No word if he ever ended up getting $3,000 out of Ed. So whether or not the story really happened is one thing, but I think we can all agree the folklore that has come out of it is interesting enough and is a definitive part of the greater American mythos, this classic haunted house story. And it's entertaining nonetheless. Number 5. The Amityville horror photo. The Warrens had been around, claiming to have seen 10,000 cases in their lifetime, but there are few of many cases that got them as much renown and people talking as the Amityville horror case. Way before there were any Conjuring movies, way before it was a smash hit franchise, they were already making tons of movies about Amityville. The Warrens have been in the silver screen since the beginning. Amityville, Long Island was the center stage for the most infamous and strange case in America. In 1974, the house had been owned by the DeFeo family, until one day, Ronald DeFeo Jr. went one by one with a rifle and claimed the life of every member of his family, later going on and telling people that spirits had commanded him to do so. After this horrifying event, a year later, the Lutz family would move in, not much bothered by the house's dark history. You know, in this market, you gotta take a good deal on rent wherever you can get it. During the first month of living there, they realized almost right away that something was wrong. Swarms of flies, banging noises, and spectral apparitions of monstrous animals or phantasmal beings that the real estate agent definitely did not mention. Now, the Warrens were called in as they were experts in the paranormal, and they were called in to investigate the haunting and see if there was anything they could do. They brought with them camera crews and tried to record their findings, most famous among them a photo of what appears to be the ghost of a boy with shimmering eyes staring down from the stairwell. It's truly chilling stuff. Now, it has to be addressed even by skeptic standards. Sorry, we gotta play Scully, it can't all be Mulder over here. That there is a lot of debate as to whether or not the Amityville horror was more like the Amityville hoax. George Lutz, the father of the Lutz family, contacted the DeFeo's lawyer, William Weber, and said he was trying to get a book written up about the client. And Weber had told news media that the haunting was all just a story he had made up with the Lutz family over a bottle of wine, in the hopes of getting a retrial, and in the hopes of getting a little bit of change for the Lutz family. So, what do you think? Was this America's most famous haunting, or was it just a fantastic backdrop for a series of okay movies? And my ghouls and goblins, if you're looking for some more terrifying true tales, or tales that ain't so true, from ghosts to cryptids to aliens and a whole lot more, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then way more. Drop a like and subscribe and stay scared. Okay, moving on. Number 4. Enfield. Another very discussed case from Ed and Lorraine Warren's case files is the infamous Enfield poltergeist haunting. It served as the backdrop for the second Conjuring film, although the second Conjuring took a bit more liberties than the other films. There was no Crooked Man or Valak in the original haunting story, but it's still pretty interesting to listen to nonetheless. It captivated audiences worldwide after photos surfaced showing what looked to be the young Hodgsons being possessed and thrown about the room levitating. It was 6 years after the Warrens had investigated the Perron family haunting, all the way in Enfield, England. The Hodgson family had been living peacefully there, helmed by the single mother Peggy Hodgson and her 4 children. It was the summer of 1977 when the youngest members of the Hodgson family seemed to be being targeted by spirits. They saw the dresser of their bedroom sliding across the room as if a powerful invisible force was pushing it all around. They would hear constant knocking from all over. Now the family called the police because they were worried that there had been a burglary, and when the officers arrived, they claimed that they arrived to a home where the furniture was free floating throughout the air. Pretty wild stuff. Now over the course of a year, psychics, investigators, amateur, and all kinds of paranormal enthusiasts came to the Enfield house in the hopes that they would be able to figure out the haunting and crack the case. Of course, it goes without saying that if this many paranormal enthusiasts were all congregating in one place, Ed and Lorraine Warren were definitely there. They were certain they had their hands on a classic poltergeist scenario. Now, like I said, between the film and the true story, they differ pretty greatly in this example. Really, the Warrens were not terribly involved with the Enfield haunting that much at all. In fact, they were barely there for a few days even. Most of the investigators that had arrived to the Enfield property had kind of suspected that it might have been a hoax, or that things had been largely exaggerated or misunderstood and stretched by people involved. But the Warrens believed that they had a good, firm case on their hands. Now, unfortunately, we can't ask them, so we can only speculate. Was that because there was a real spirit, a real haunting, or is it just because they had the foresight and they knew that this was going to make a great script for an entry in a movie franchise someday? In 1979, 2 years after the first reportings, the Enfield haunting mysteriously stopped. No more sightings, no more reports. Was it ever really there? Number 3, the Shadow Doll. When you enter the Warrens' haunted museum, one of the first things you'll see is this frightening little doll, affectionately dubbed the Shadow Doll. It's made of bird feathers and real human teeth. Oh, that's just lovely, thanks. It's currently owned by Tony Spera, the son-in-law of the late Warrens and the current proprietor of the museum. He offers a little bit of insight into the doll's unique history, saying it was originally acquired at an antique shop where it was being sold with the owner unaware of the doll's negative energy, which I feel that is totally on you. You're running an antique store and you're not a little bit concerned that someone came to you with a doll with real human teeth and bird feathers? I feel like you don't need to know that much about the occult or to be a big horror movie guy to know that is definitely cursed. If somebody comes in and drops a doll off at your store that has human teeth, your first response has to be to chuck that thing in the ocean, not put a $14.99 price tag on it. Oh, anyway, Spera claims the doll has an insidious little gift inside of it, and that's if you take a photograph of the doll and then the photo develops, you write a curse that you'd like to inflict on the back of the photo, and then you send it to your victim. The person who then opens the envelope and sees the doll in the photo will invite the curse into your home. And I know what you're worrying about right now. Are you cursed right now watching this video? Nah, you're good. I think digital photos are fine, and besides, I would never write any curses on any of these photos. And if I was ever gonna curse you, I would curse you to always make the right amount of pasta and have your crush text you back. I would only curse you something real nice. Now my big question about the Shadow Doll is, do you think it gets jealous having to share museum space with Annabelle? How hard must it be to be the second most famous cursed doll in a museum of cursed dolls? People come in all day to gawk at your movie star sister, get autographs and selfies with her, and you just have to sit and stew. No wonder the doll is cursing people. I think it's got some repressed aggression. Number 2, the Southend Werewolf. This is maybe one of the odder cases in the Warrens' history, which is really saying something since the only thing the Warrens ever investigated was incredibly odd cases. This one was back in England again, in Essex. The Warrens got word of a particularly unusual case. This wasn't a haunted house or a poltergeist or a suspected demon possession or anything. This was someone claiming they had come down bad with a case of lycanthropy. There was a bad moon rising over Essex. A carpenter by the name of William Ramsey had claimed that since his youth, he had been cursed into transforming into a werewolf. Not every night or on full moons, but seemingly random times, the spirit of a wolf would overtake him and he would go feral. It hurts seeing someone live out your childhood dreams like that. He claims that he's been plagued his whole life, and his first transformation occurred when he was a boy. He was playing outside when he felt an icy breeze coming over his skin, freezing his sweat to his skin. He then said he felt a primal bloodlust and hunger coming over him, and he was overwhelmed by a pungent, awful odor. He flew into a fit of rage and found himself shredding a fence post with the fence still attached and chewing at wire mesh. Now for years he wrote this off as a strange incident. You know, something that every boy goes through when you're growing up. Puberty's a strange time. It wasn't until 1983 that the wolf came out to play again. William was out at the pub with his friends when he felt that familiar chill come over him. He felt the sweat freezing to his skin and excused himself to go to a bathroom, and claims that when he looked into the mirror, all he saw back was a wolf's unmistakable snout and yellow eyes staring back at him. He called the cab home but had to be held down by the driver because he was thrashing and lashing out at the driver and other passengers. Eventually, he composed himself. I think they gave him a milk bone, and he tried to live quietly after these incidents. It was in 1989 when Ed and Lorraine caught wind of the case. They invited him to get to Connecticut for a personal exorcism. I thought it was silver bullets that dealt with werewolves, but I guess that's probably a more permanent solution. Exorcism was probably the right way to go. Initially, William was skeptical, which I find kind of interesting. You turn into a werewolf, but you're skeptical that an exorcism will make a difference? Anyway, he ended up visiting, and reports claim that after a long night of violent thrashing, the wolf was finally exorcised, and since then, William Ramsey was able to find peace. And number 1, the satanic idol. I don't know, Ed and Lorraine, a satanic idol? A human skull? Well, those things sound like they could be haunted. Do you guys like haunted things? No way a satanic idol and human skull that were involved in dark rituals are haunted. No way. The skull was given to the Warrens as a gift, which is kind of an odd gift to someone, but hey, they were kind of odd people, so they were probably thrilled to death with it. Now the idol is a different story. The tall, slender, bizarre idol doesn't immediately scream Satan or satanic, but you can take a look at it and you'd kind of be unnerved. This is not the kind of thing I would bring in off the side of the road. It's not the kind of thing you'd want to catch in the woods, and yet for one lonesome hunter, that is exactly what happened. Apparently the idol and the skull with it were taken from the woods nearby to the Warren estate by a local hunter who'd found them. The hunter claims he was approached by a man in mysterious black garb who ushered him away. Now obviously he was a little shaken and stirred by such a bizarre experience, so he went to the only people he thought he'd be able to trust with something like this, the Warrens, and took the idol to them for safekeeping. After he brought it to them, Lorraine fell deeply ill with no one able to diagnose what was happening to her. Ed believed that his family was being targeted for welcoming the idol into their home. You'd think that a demonologist would have seen that one coming, but hey, we all make mistakes. Lorraine recovered, and although no details emerged on how she did or what they did to purify and cleanse the idol, we can assume most likely it was probably blessed, exorcised, and doused in holy water of some kind, otherwise it wouldn't be fit to sit amongst their other treasures. It now rests inside the museum, alongside all of their other haunted relics. It's evil waiting inside, as it waits patiently for a Hollywood executive to come to it, and it's open to offers for a 3-picture deal with spin-offs included. Number 5, the White Lady Ghost. Among the Warrens' career of demonology was this peculiar case involving a local Connecticut legend, the White Lady Ghost of Union Cemetery. Whoosh, that's a doozy of a title. Can't you just be a spooky ghost? Anyway, Union Cemetery dates back 400 years, and it's said to be haunted by this one notable ghost. The tricky thing is though, nobody quite knows the exact origin of who she is. Some speculate that she's a woman who lost her child in childbirth and hasn't been able to move on to the afterlife because she still seeks out her child. Others speculate that she's a ghost of a victim who had been dumped into a sinkhole near the cemetery, and she's been unable to move on while this crime goes unsolved. You know, the fact that we don't even know her name or who she is, that's probably bothering her. That's probably contributing to all her worldly stress. The only things anyone can agree on truly is that those who say they've seen her claim that she's dressed in a bright white nightgown and has her head and face concealed with a white bonnet. One particularly good ghost story, local legend, says that in the late 90s, a firefighter responding to a call nearby said a woman in a white dress jumped in front of the truck and landed behind him. When he leapt out of the vehicle, there was no body on the ground, but a dent in the hood. Naturally, such a popular local ghost story caught the attention of Connecticut natives Ed and Lorraine Warren, and this never-before-seen footage was released by Tony Spera, their son-in-law, and it's Ed filming the cemetery looking for proof of the White Lady. We'll play some of it for you now so you can get your eyes on it and you can try to make out what's happening. Ed Warren claims that in the footage you can see the ghost walking behind him in the shadows and turning to look at him. Lorraine Warren once said this evidence was so important that it had to be locked away to be studied by the New England Society of Paranormal Research. And I don't want to pop anyone's balloon here. It looks to me like they locked it away because it's not really that impressive. I personally couldn't really see anything in this, but let me know down below if you think this is smoking proof of a ghost walking through the graveyard, or if it's just some blurry lights through the fog. And if you're looking for more ghost videos, stories about Ed and Lorraine, hauntings, possessions, exorcisms, and basically anything freaky, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some on top of it. Click through, subscribe, and like, and I am certain you'll find something to suit your fears. Stay scared. Number 4, the museum tour. If you want to go to the world's foremost collection of haunted relics and cursed objects, there's probably no room more affected by evil than the legendary collection of the Warrens' Haunted Museum of souvenirs from their case files. Now, sadly, as of this recording, the museum is currently closed down and hopefully reopening someday soon, but in the meantime, you can take a little digital tour. As this footage posted by the Warrens' son-in-law, Tony Spera, shows Ed Warren giving a guided tour of some of the more unique and memorable haunted artifacts resting in that Connecticut garage. Now, the full video is definitely worth a watch if you're a fan of the Warrens, since it's about as close as you'll be able to get to walk around the museum these days. It's a full half-hour long of Ed Warren walking around, going into grand detail and recounting some stories about their more notable cases. Some shoutouts I'll include real quick include the witch Hannah Cranna, an old Connecticut legend, or the conjuring mirror, which might sound like it has something to do with the movie series, but actually refers to a bizarre case where someone used the mirror in a ritual to try and summon a demon and ended up inviting a poltergeist into his house. Ed talks briefly on some of their favorites, their cursed dolls and toys, such as a dinosaur from the Devil Made Me Do It case, and of course, no visit to the Warrens Museum could possibly exclude mention of Annabelle, who's basically the star attraction of the place and probably why anyone knows who the Warrens are and what keeps the lights on for so long. Annabelle is shown under a tight lock and key as Ed goes over her history of how they brought her in and first found her and how they eventually contained her. He touches briefly on her protocol, how she has to always be locked up in a storage box behind glass, surrounded by rosary beads and doused in holy water in an effort to keep the evil inside of her tucked away. And just a quick little small aside here from me. If a spirit is so powerful and so malevolent that it's able to possess a doll, and contain unspeakable evil and attack humans, how is it thwarted so easily by a little bit of glass? I mean, I guess it's still a doll, it doesn't get demon strength, but I didn't know the solution for dealing with demons is the same way you deal with like a dog that's being kind of troublesome. You just put something around them until they can behave. Anyway, moving on. Number 3, an exorcism. To some, the ultimate paranormal dream would be getting to ride shotgun with the Warrens on one of their cases, getting to experience the paranormal firsthand under the tutelage of those who have battled it their whole lives. It would be like if Obi-Wan Kenobi picked you up on some backwater desert planet and asked if you wanted to go on a great adventure with him. It would be awesome. Well, some people get to live their dreams every day. Like me, you know, my dream was to stand in front of a camera and talk about ghosts all day long. A YouTuber by the name of Haley Reese got the rare opportunity to meet Tony Spera, the husband of Judy Warren, daughter of the family, and Lorraine Warren a bit before she passed away, and she got a blessed look into some never before seen footage of the pair of demonologists conducting some field work, namely an exorcism. Now, the person being exorcised, their name is Roberto, but they've been blurred out to protect their safety. Demon possession is one thing, but doxing is a whole other. We see Lorraine and Tony both fiercely conducting an exorcism, locked in a spiritual battle against the forces inside. We hear Tony asking for the demon's name repeatedly, not just because he's a friendly guy, he seems like he's pretty friendly, but because to properly drive a demon out of a host, you need to know its name. Well, just listen to what he answers with. It's gonna shock you. Beelzebub. Now, there's a bit of discrepancy whether or not Beelzebub and the devil are considered different entities, depending on the text you're reading or the mythology. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Either way, it's bad news. It's not something you would like to invite inside you. The worst part is if you're listening, apparently that's not even the only demon inside. It was like a clown car of demonic energy inside one guy. Now, thankfully, after a tough battle, they were able to get all the demons outside of him and hopefully banish them all away. Do you think it leaves like a weird taste in your mouth after you've had demonic possession? Like, you know, when you wake up, like after having a nap and your mouth just feels weird? I feel like I need to brush my teeth a few times at least afterwards. Number 2, Annabelle on tour. Annabelle is the #1 name in cursed dolls. Sorry Megan, we love you, but Annabelle's got staying power and she's just been here longer. More movies too, although on a side note, I'm hoping they make more Megan movies. As such, Annabelle has become quite popular, with a lot of demand for the cursed toy, despite the fact that, you know, she's got a demon inside of her and is apparently very evil, and she should be kept under proper lock and key. Did you know that there was a significant enough demand for Annabelle that she tours? Yeah, you heard me right. Annabelle tours. And you know what? I think that's great. Girl, get it. You gotta get that bag, you know? The movies made you a star, really propelled you to the world stage. It would be a shame to keep you locked up in Connecticut when your fans are waiting. A recent clip made the rounds on TikTok of a paranormal investigator, Eric Vital, transporting the allegedly haunted doll to take her to Paracon, a convention for ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts to break bread, swap stories, and pick up cursed goods, founded in the Warrens' memory to carry on their legacy and establish a community of ghost hunters. Eric is part of the New England Society for Paranormal Research, the foundation created by Ed and Lorraine to further the development and research of the paranormal. Now, this short video of him unpacking Annabelle got all kinds of attention on TikTok, mostly from people wondering why you would want to take her anywhere, or why you would want to get your hands on her at all. I mean, inside the case she's carried and literally says do not open under any circumstances. Now, Eric did understand this, and he assured that those who are worried that they take all the proper precautions, and that's not just putting Annabelle in a seatbelt. We take this very seriously, he said. Our faith is very strong, all of us. So we bless the van. We all have enormous amounts of holy water. We have a priest come in, bless the area, and bless the items. And maybe put her in a car seat too, just to be safe. And number 1, Buddhist Exorcism. You know, it wasn't just the United States where Ed and Lorraine worked on their cases. If there was a call for it, the Warrens would do their best to answer. Plus, I feel like if you only ghost hunt in one country, you're missing out on so many good demons and scares. If you're a fan of the channel, then you know by now just how many really fascinating cultural and regional monsters that exist out there and all the different ghost stories that exist. You know, you can spend your whole life battling demons, but have you ever gone toe to toe with a yokai or an oni? Maybe that's why the Warrens decided to take a trip to Japan in the early 2000s. Maybe they just wanted a nice vacation, or maybe they were getting tired of local poltergeists and wanted a new difficult challenge. They set out to Japan to investigate these allegedly haunted tunnels, where a number of people were reported to have died in. Ed was a former World War II Navy veteran, and he had spent a lot of time around Japan and was interested in their culture and the reports and things that he had heard. Of course, it was hardly a vacation, because while they were there, they were asked to participate in a Buddhist exorcism of a young woman named Teresa who had become the unwilling host to a litany of demons. They were aided by a group of Buddhists during their exorcism, a change of pace from their usual help from ordained Catholic ministers. We'll play it for you now so you can get some eyes on it. In the clip, we can hear Lorraine doing her level best to try and cast the evil out of the young girl's body. Now, the clip's a bit hard to watch, I'm gonna be honest. Seeing somebody writhe around screaming in what looks like agony, but luckily, they're being tended to by the experts, I guess. If there was anyone you'd want, it would probably be Ed and Lorraine and a group of Buddhists. Ed and Lorraine said the Buddhists were extremely helpful, saying they were cut from a different cloth. And if they're ever running out of conjuring movies or running out of ideas for them, I think they should start sending the Warrens internationally. Or just stop pretending they're based on true stories altogether. Have the Warrens try to fight Godzilla, or have them fight the Predator or something. Let's see them exercise their way out of that one. Let's see holy water and a little rosary take on the Predator.
In our 5th place position, we have my favorite creepy doll, Annabelle. Back when I was in high school, I actually got to portray her in a local haunted house, which was the beginning of my scare acting career. Hey, I promise I am quite terrifying if I want to be. I promise. For those of you who might be rolling their eyes right now, I'm going to refresh memories on the real Annabelle story. So feel free to cozy up and listen. Donna and Angie were student nurses and good friends who had decided to room together while in school. And for Donna's 28th birthday, her mom had gifted her a very large Raggedy Ann doll, something she was thrilled about. Personally, I'd react the same way. Let the record know that I'm always down to accept gifts of dolls or plushies. Soon after adopting the precious doll, Donna started to notice some weird behavior. She would leave Annabelle in her bed every morning behind her locked bedroom door, seating her the same way with her arms and legs crossed, and would come home at night to Annabelle having moved rooms and in positions that weren't possible. She's described a few instances of the doll kneeling, and speaking from experience, stuffed dolls can't kneel without falling for more than a few seconds. Donna and Angie then started finding notes left throughout the apartment, written on parchment paper in red pen. two things they didn't own. When Donna's boyfriend Lou started criticizing the doll, unexplainable handprints and scratches began appearing on his body. And that's when the girls made the decision to call a priest, who then brought in the Warrens. They were able to calm down the entity enough to remove it from the home and transport her to their museum, where she resides to this day. Now, the footage I'm talking about here is from the visitors who have visited Annabelle in her current residence over the years. If you look closely, you can just see the energy that's alive in her. Also, if she was never removed from her box until like the last few years, how is she able to change position ever so slightly from one video to the next? You tell me here. In fourth place, we have footage from a Buddhist exorcism. Known as parita, which can be translated as protection or safeguard, it refers to the Buddhist practice of reciting certain verses and scriptures in order to ward off misfortune or danger. The practice of reciting or listening to the parita suttas began very early in the history of Buddhism. The Mahavamsa contains the earliest historical reference to this practice, describing how Upatissa I instructed monks to recite the Ratana Sutta throughout the night during a period when Sri Lanka was afflicted by plague and diseases. In the Pali literature, these short verses are recommended by the Buddha as providing protection from certain afflictions. The belief in the effective power to heal or protect of the Sakakariya, or asseveration of something quite true, is an aspect of the work ascribed to the Parita. It is also widely believed that all-night recitations of Parita by monks bring safety, peace, and well-being to a community. Parita discourses can be recited at events like a funeral or on the death anniversary of a loved one, and can also be recited to placate antagonistic spirits. In 1987, Ed and Lorraine took a trip to Japan to offer their expertise in some cases that were ongoing in different parts of the country, with one of their stops being to a Buddhist temple. Describing everyone they encountered as lovely, Ed and Lorraine were shocked when they came upon not one, but two people under possession. Ed described one as being under the influence of a snake demon, as they slithered around the floor constantly with their tongue darting in and out of their mouth. The possessed people were blindfolded, so the demons couldn't witness the rites, as the Buddhas went through the rituals and chanted around them. After the spirits were cast out, a bonfire was built to help guide them towards the afterlife. The footage we see is from a later round of prayers, which was held because one of the sets of spirits refused initially to depart from her attached soul. You can hear Lorraine attempting to guide the spirit out with the aid of a translator, coaxing Teresa to go on to the light and fly away, that her family was no longer here. In third place, we have the elusive White Lady of Union Graveyard. Some believe she is Harriet Seeley, whose young son passed shortly after being born, and Harriet herself passing soon afterwards. Legend believes she may have died in hopes of finding her son, and still wanders their final resting place searching him out, while others believe she is the ghost of a woman from the 1940s who killed her husband and later herself and is doomed to wander the graveyard. You tell me which one you believe. Her physical description is the one thing that remains consistent. She is a young woman wearing a white dress with dark hair. Thank goodness I'm not wearing white today. It seems as if she enjoys scaring the daylights out of the living, which, hey, my kind of gal. Many who have witnessed her believe they have almost hit her with their vehicle, only to find no trace of her once they pull over, while others claim they have often seen her hovering slightly above the ground around the cemetery, going back and forth amongst different gravestones. In 1993, local firefighter Glenn Powell received a call about a transformer explosion and drove to the scene of the incident with a police officer and observed a female driver following closely behind him on the road. He remembers the night sky had turned pink, my favorite color, and the explosion emitted large amounts of electricity that had made the hair on his arm stand up at a close distance. Glenn was driving along the road beside the cemetery when the officer seated next to him yelled, "Watch out!" In the middle of the road was a woman with, you guessed it, long brown flowing hair and wearing a white Victorian nightgown. Glenn described seeing a surprised look on her face before slamming on the brakes, but was unable to avoid hitting her, describing it like hitting a brick wall, with the back of his truck flying into the air and the policeman next to him being launched into the dashboard. The driver behind him jumped out of the car and helped the two men search the area of the crash to check on the woman. Glenn is quoted as saying, "There was no red bodily fluids, there was no clothing, there was nobody, there was nothing." Located in Connecticut, Lorraine used to often take walks through the cemetery, saying that it was one of the most haunted places around. Ed caught the White Lady on camera on September 1st, 1990 at 2:40 a.m., his 7th night in a row of filming at the cemetery, determined to have footage as proof, and we can show some of that footage to you now. He described dark figures surrounding her, shapes that he said were wood ghosts that seemed to jump on her while they all argued. In second place, we have the Amityville Horror. On November 13th of 1974, Ronald DeFeo Sr., his wife, and 4 of their offspring, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John, had their lives ended by a firearm inside their home in suburban Amityville, New York. And at the time, homicide detectives claimed it was the largest number of victims in a single slang on Long Island. The deceased were found in their nightclothes and were shot in the back, apparently while they were asleep. There were no signs of a struggle inside the home, where a sign hanging outside the main entrance read, "High hopes." Sure. The killings were reported by the only surviving member of the family, the oldest son. Ronald. He told the police that he arrived at the home shortly after 6 p.m. but found the front door locked, so he crawled into the house through a window and stumbled across the icky scene. He later confessed that he had ended the lives of his family around 3:30 a.m., acting out the scenes for detectives as he described how he took out his family one by one, with the weapon eventually being found in Amityville Creek. Ronald's trial began in October of 1975. His defense attorney, William Weber, tried to make a case that the defendant, who allegedly heard voices, was innocent by reason of insanity, but the court eventually sentenced him to 6 concurrent 25-year to life sentences. Try saying that 5 times fast. Eesh. A year later, the Lutz family moved into the now abandoned home, and that's where this goes from simply tragic to much, much more. Most of the DeFeo family's furniture was still in the house, because it was included for $400 as part of the deal. You know what, I'd take that deal too. A friend of George Lutz, the father of the family, had learned about the history of the house and insisted on having it blessed, and at the time, George was a non-practicing Methodist and had no experience of what this would entail. Kathy, the mom, was a non-practicing Catholic and explained the process to him. George knew a Catholic priest named Father Mancuso who agreed to carry out the house blessing. He arrived to perform the blessing while George and Kathy were unpacking their belongings on the afternoon of December 18th, 1975, and went into the home to carry out the rites. When he flicked the first amount of holy water and began to pray, he heard a masculine voice demand that he get out. When leaving the house, the priest did not mention this incident to either George or Kathy until December 24th, when he called George and advised him to stay out of the second floor room where he had heard the mysterious voice, which happened to be the former bedroom of Mark and John DeFeo that Kathy had planned to use as a sewing room, but the call was cut short by static. Following his visit to the house, the father allegedly developed a high fever and blisters on his hands, similar to stigmata. At first, George and Kathy experienced nothing unusual in the house, but the horrors that happened over the next 28 days were awful for the Lutz family, bearing witness to slime pouring out of their walls, strange odors throughout the home, and George would wake up at 3:15 every morning, which is right around the time Ron DeFeo carried out his original crimes. A garage door would open and close on its own, an invisible spirit knocked a knife down in the kitchen, a pig-like creature with red eyes was reported staring at George and his son Daniel through a window. Also, Kathy and 2 of her children experienced bouts of levitation while trying to sleep. The footage we have from this heinous month is of a boy with glowing eyes, believed to be the spirit of the late John DeFeo. By mid-January of 1976, after another attempt at a house blessing by George and Kathy, they experienced what would be their final night in the house. Now, the Lutzes were never able to give a full account of the events that took place on this occasion, describing them as too frightening. After getting in touch with Father Mancuso, the Lutzes decided to take some belongings and stay at Kathy's mother's house in nearby Deer Park, New York, until they had sorted out the problems with the house. They claimed the phenomena followed them there, describing greenish-black slime coming up the staircase towards them. Yeah, no thanks. And finally, in first place, we have footage of an American exorcism. While the video is blurred out on YouTube to protect the identity of the poor girl, I personally think it's up there as one of the most frightening things I've ever seen. At an hour and 20 minutes long, it depicts a Catholic bishop in Connecticut attempting to converse with a demonic entity that has possessed the body of an innocent young woman, while her family restrains her. Ed and Lorraine were the ones to alert the church to the possession after meeting her during an audience chat session that was held at the conclusion of one of their public presentations. During portions of the exorcism when prayer is done, you can hear the demon acting wildly, and it originally refuses to give its name, both of which are quite common in cases of demonic possession. Eventually, we learn that there are 4 demons possessing our victim, with one of them identifying themselves as Robert, which happens to be a name associated with the son of Satan. I'll let a snippet roll now, allowing you to hear the woman for yourself. And that's the end of this list, bringing me to my regular motto: don't mess with spirits, don't mess with Ouija boards, and for the love of everything, let demons be. Trust me, I love spooky things and reading spooky stories, but it's so not worth it to bring that kind of hell into your life. Random human beings are scary enough as it is.
Number 5. The Borley Rectory. The Borley Rectory is an old London estate that has the unique distinction of being considered the most haunted building in the United Kingdom. No big deal or anything. Almost immediately after its constructions, the stories of hauntings started to come out. A local legend says that in the 12th century, a priest and a nun had an affair, and when they were discovered, the nun was bricked up and left to rot in the nearby church. And since then, there's been all manner of legend about her spirit roaming, seemingly in the halls of the rectory. The film The Nun could possibly be based on this. In 1900, the 4 daughters of the estate owner all said they saw a nun wandering around the estate at night. When they tried to speak to her, they got no response. The family had repeatedly claimed they'd seen this nun around their property, and at one occasion, what they thought was the spectral apparition of a horse-drawn carriage with a headless rider. From there on, there was constant reportings of bizarre sounds, strange shadows. In 1927, the original family owning the estate had all passed, and a new family moved in and immediately started experiencing hauntings all the same. The new family, the Smiths, discovered a human skull in the cupboard in a brown bag shortly after unpacking. They reported poltergeist behavior like unexplained footsteps, lights flickering around them, and the same sightings of headless specters. After only 2 years, the Smith family left the rectory, unable to deal with the hauntings present. The next family, the Foysters, experienced, well, wouldn't you know it, all the same things. Objects flying around their home, and on one occasion, claimed that their daughter was attacked by something horrible. They swiftly moved out as well, and the last owner of the rectory would be Captain Gregson, who accidentally lit the estate ablaze while unpacking, knocking over a lantern. Although an insurance report claims that they think the fire was started intentionally, perhaps in a desperate attempt to cast away whatever evil remains in the Borley Rectory, or maybe he unleashed it onto the world. Now, my friends, if you want to hear more scary stories about haunted houses and just about everything else under the sun, we're the place to be. Subscribe and keep on creeping on. Number 4. Roland Doe. Now, the story of Roland Doe is fairly notable as far as famous exorcisms go, mainly because Roland Doe's case served as the inspiration for the legendary horror film The Exorcist. Roland Doe, a name for the anonymous boy, lived a quiet life in Maryland. He was the family's only son and didn't have much in the way of friends while growing up, save for his Aunt Harriet, a spiritualist and lover of the occult. When Roland was young, she gifted him a Ouija board and taught him how to use it. Now, in 1949, dear old Aunt Harriet would pass away, devastating Roland and the family. After her passing, the family started to experience strange, inexplicable occurrences around the home. Scratching would come from inside the walls, water would be leaking out of all the pipes, and curiously, Roland's bed would be moved around in the middle of the night. Confused, the family sought out the experts of everyone they knew, and their local minister suggested they needed the help of an exorcist. Priests came to exorcise the home and Roland, believing that the boy had been possessed by the devil. They strapped him to a mattress to begin, but had to stop when he broke the straps and slashed one of the clergymen with the strap. Red scratches appeared all over his body, reading out the word Louis. The family believed this was a sign they needed to move to St. Louis, where the family had relatives. From there, they were put into contact with a series of priests who would conduct round-the-clock exorcisms on Roland. The days would pass normally, but at night, the battle would begin when Roland would enter a trance-like state, speaking in Latin, gutturally growling, even threatening priests that Satan had taken him. For weeks, the priests toiled tirelessly to exorcise the demon, until eventually there was a miracle breakthrough. The priests called upon the power of St. Michael and told the demon he was coming to battle them. Roland woke the next morning and said he had a vision of Satan and St. Michael on a heavenly battlefield, fighting for control of his soul, and that he knew Satan was gone. From here, Roland lived a happy, healthy, normal life, and his case might have been forgotten if author William Blatty wasn't inspired by the case after reading a story about it in the paper. But without him, we never would have got The Exorcist, so it all worked out, mostly. Number 3. The Crescent Hotel. Now, the Crescent Hotel is a beautiful stop if you're ever visiting Arkansas. It's been called the Grand Old Lady of the Ozarks due to its gorgeous old Gothic design and wonderful view of the mountains. What a shame that such a beautiful spot is said to be home to tortured souls unable to move on. During construction of the Crescent Hotel, a worker named Michael plunged from the death, fatally landing in room 218. The room has since been a hotspot for paranormal activity, with bizarre noises and laughter reportedly heard by the guests. But this wouldn't be the only haunting present at the Crescent Hotel. You see, before it found life as a hotel resort and a spa, the Crescent Hotel was run by a charismatic charlatan named Norman Baker, who ran an alternative clinic out of the hotel, claiming the spring waters had restorative powers and could cure any ailments. Of course, Baker didn't even have the slightest medical experience or training and was far closer to a two-bit con man than he was a doctor. Patients would check in and never leave. Baker would promise patients a cure for everything up to cancer, when in reality he was just injecting them with corn silk and water. Baker was arrested for his crimes in 1949, but the souls of those he tormented wouldn't find peace yet. All throughout the hotel, guests report strange noises, scratchings, whisperings, with some going so far as to say they see ghastly figures, floating orbs, and such. There's even a notable ghost who wanders the halls. A nurse named Theodora is the hotel's most prominent ghost, who manifests as an old woman flustered out of room 14. She hates mess and discord, and many guests report that they'll discover their belongings have been rearranged if they're staying in her room. There's even sightings of a ghost cat named Morris, who luckily is a benevolent spirit. Guests report hearing purring or feeling a mysterious warm brushing against their legs. I just hope there's meow mix in the afterlife. Number 2. The Winchester House. William Winchester was the heir to the Winchester rifle throne, and married to his wife Sarah, they lived happily. They welcomed a daughter, although tragically she fell ill immediately and passed before her first birthday. Shortly after, William would pass as well, leaving Sarah alone, depressed, and with roughly $20 million kicking around. In 1886, Sarah used the money to move from Connecticut to California and began construction on her legacy, her mansion. It was built for 20 years. She paid workers night and day round the clock, demolishing one improvement to make another. But the house wasn't built like any other house. It seemed random, like it was being built out of a dream. A staircase that goes nowhere, ending at the ceiling. Multiple boarded up rooms. She spent roughly $5 million on the construction of the odd home. But why? Did she just want something to start conversations when dinner guests were over? Well, shortly after her family tragedies, Sarah visited a psychic for advice, who told her she was being cursed by the spirits of all the lives taken by her husband's rifles. That is a lot of angry cowboys. She was told she needed to build a mansion to capture the wandering souls and seal them away from the rest of the world, and she made it her life's mission to accomplish this. She thought that the house's bizarre design would confuse spirits and keep them at bay. I honestly don't know about that. I thought ghosts could float and go through walls. I don't even know if they would care. The house still stands and is a popular tourist spot for fledgling ghost hunters, who believe that her massive ghost trap did work and she's caught spirits, with reportings of mysterious sounds. There are some who even claim that Sarah herself has been trapped in her home, doomed to walk amongst the spirits she worked so hard to capture. Number 1. The Bell Witch. In the 1800s, a farmer named John Bell moved his family to Adams, Tennessee, onto a bountiful 300-acre farm. Bell quickly became a figurehead of the community, respected by many, and becoming a local leader at his town's church. For the Bell family, things were the brightest they've ever been. They were living the dream. But things wouldn't be good for long, and they'd find themselves in a nightmare. By 1817, strange things started to occur around the farmstead. John found a mysterious animal, a mutant hybrid that resembled a grotesque mix between a dog and a rabbit. The Bell children would complain to their father that they would hear strange sounds that sounded like vermin gnawing at all things in their bedrooms, and the children would wake up with scratches all over their bodies. At all hours of the day, everyone in the family would complain that they could hear faint whispering and singing, and that it sounded like an old woman was singing hymns on their wall. Most tragically, the Bells found a mysterious vial of liquid inside their home that no one could understand. Nervous about what it was, John Bell offered a small amount of it to their cat, who passed almost immediately after. For 3 long years, the Bell family was tormented by these strange occurrences, chalking it up to a mysterious entity that would later be known as the Bell Witch, named after the mysterious old humming that they kept hearing. In 1820, John Bell grew extremely ill, quickly descending in health and passing. At his funeral, the mourners complained that all they could hear was the laughing of an old woman, mocking and singing at the late John Bell. The farm was so notable that it even caught the attention of President Andrew Jackson, who in 1819, a year before John Bell's passing, visited it to see if the legends of the witch were true. Allegedly, as soon as his carriage arrived at the property, the horses refused to budge anymore. The animals can always tell.
Number 5 on this list is the haunting in Connecticut. This haunting is the haunting of the Snedeker family. List verse writes, after renovations on the house were complete, Carmen Snedeker entered the basement for the first time. There, she found embalming equipment and body tags with the names of the deceased. The family soon realized that the house was infested with demons. Carmen witnessed the water in her mop bucket turn a different color. She recalled the mop water was blood red. I mean a deep, deep red. It made my skin crawl. The middle son said the lights were coming on and off and on and off even though there was no bulbs in it. Ed and Lorraine Warren assisted in performing an exorcism on the house, which has brought closure to the family. Since then, no further paranormal activity has occurred. The Snedeker family remained in the house for 2 more years before they relocated to Tennessee. So guys, all of this is well and good, and it's what the Warrens want you to believe. Is it true? Probably not. You see, they had someone come in and write a book about the events that happened here. He went in and interviewed the family multiple times, and it turns out that they couldn't keep their story straight at all. They were all over the place, and it felt like nobody actually knew what happened. Then he went to Ed and told Ed that he can't write this story because nobody has any idea what actually went down. And you know what Ed said? Just make it up. That's literally what happened, guys. The story about this place is just made up, and it was probably never even true to begin with. Also, while literal mop buckets were filling up with blood downstairs, the upstairs neighbor was totally fine and just living their life. Seems kinda strange that the demonic possession would differentiate between floors, but I guess that's what the Warrens want you to think. Number 4 on this list is the vampire girl. Now this is one of those cases that, if it's true, doesn't get enough of the limelight. The Warrens have dealt with werewolves before, and we actually looked into the Southend Werewolf and what it's all about in one of our previous videos. But this vampire case, it never really gets talked about. The Warrens were brought in to deal with an 18-year-old girl who was going down a path of vampirism. This girl was very interested in death and the underworld. She started performing satanic rituals by herself and, as you'd expect, ended up becoming possessed. The possession was clearly vampiric in nature, and the demon was hungry for blood. It's said that she would wait in cemeteries for unsuspecting victims and then attack them right when they got there. It was reported that 16 people were bitten by this girl, and she would actually drink their blood. To my knowledge, nobody was killed, but there were obviously some pretty serious injuries involved. Now what strikes me as odd is why this case hasn't been discussed more. It almost feels a bit like a secret because it's never brought up and largely forgotten about. Yet, when you consider what actually happened and the events that transpired, this is one of the most shocking things they ever did. The fact that we don't bring up this case and talk about it more actually leads me to believe that if there is any truth to be had in the Warrens' exploits, it might be here. Maybe they were actually trying to protect the world from the truth here. The truth that vampires are potentially real. Number 3 on this list is Ed's relatives. This is something that really doesn't get mentioned a lot, but Ed Warren saw demons just like the rest of the people he tried to help. I think the media often portrayed the Warrens as these almost superhuman individuals who were impervious to the will of paranormal entities, but Ed certainly struggled with this growing up and for much of his life. Apparently, Ed would be frequented by the ghosts of long-past family members. These paranormal entities would speak to him and tell him to do things. He was pretty private about what they would say to him, but we know that he did in fact get frequented by them. Who knows what they could have told him to do though, or how long he was seeing these visions. I think the reason that this was kept under wraps for a while was to preserve Ed's image as the person who comes in and saves people from these paranormal entities, rather than potentially somebody who suffers from them as well. Number 2 on this list is Arn Cheyenne Johnson. This is the infamous Devil Made Me Do It case. Arn Cheyenne Johnson killed his landlord in 1981 by stabbing him to death. When he was brought to court though, he claimed that he was not in control of his actions and the devil literally possessed him and made him do it. Now this is pretty serious stuff, so how does Ed and Lorraine Warren fit in? Well, it's been speculated that Ed and Lorraine might have made the entire thing up, which effectively means that they were trying to get a murderer to go free based on a blatant lie. Johnson had a brother-in-law whose name was David. David was mentally ill. He needed professional help. The Warrens saw this as an opportunity and decided to try and exploit it. They came in and tried to manipulate the family to say that David was initially possessed with a demon and that Johnson came in, told the demon to take his body instead, and saved David from said demon. If the public believed this, then the Warrens would be smack dab in the center of a massive demon case. David and his family would get a lot of money from publicity deals, and the murderer Johnson would get off scot-free. It was a win-win-win for everyone except the justice system. Well, David's family wasn't happy about it after some thinking. They ended up suing the Warrens, claiming that they manipulated them and tried to get a guilty man to walk free, which, if everything that I just said is true, they did actually do. Just another secret that came out that they didn't want to be revealed. And finally, number 1 on this list is Annabelle. In our last part of the series, we were breaking down some of the Warrens' cases and talking about how some of them may have been fraudulent. Well, a lot of you were commenting on that video asking about one of their most famous cases that I haven't brought up yet. Annabelle. The Annabelle doll is one of the most widely known cases that the Warrens participated in and would probably be on most people's lists when it comes to the creepiest dolls to ever exist. This doll even inspired the creation of a horror franchise of the same name that's had 3 separate installments in it. Pretty good notoriety for an inanimate object. Or maybe inanimate is the wrong word when talking about Annabelle. The legend began back in the 1970s when a young nurse named Donna received the doll as a gift from her mother. The doll took up residence on her sofa and at first was a nice and calming little plush toy that had nothing demonic about it at all. Soon things started getting a little bit weird though. Donna would go to work and find things out of place or doors open that weren't that way when she left. Then her and her roommate started finding notes around the apartment. Tiny little scribbled notes on parchment paper that would read, "Help me." Finally, it all came bubbling up when Lou, Donna's boyfriend, was in her apartment one afternoon by himself. The most common version of the story says that he was napping and then woke up to the doll literally trying to kill him, strangling him until he finally had enough strength to throw it off of him. Apparently he even had several scratch marks on him for a few days, but then they went away after that. This is when Ed and Lorraine entered into the mix. They took the story and absolutely ran with it. Apparently as they were taking this doll, which they had determined was possessed, as they were taking it back to a safe place, it tried to crash their car several times, and only putting holy water on it would stop this interference. Of course, no one else was actually in the car at the time, so we just sort of need to take their words for it. And that's actually the thing with this story. The only actual evidence or proof about this doll is that they told people it was haunted. There's no video of it moving, there's no pictures of it acting crazy. Anytime I've seen it, it just looks like a regular doll. Because of this, we can't say that it's fake, but we also can't really say that it's real either. I will say, after everything we revealed in the last video, I'm starting to have a hard time just accepting what Ed and Lorraine tell me. So honestly, Annabelle being fake could definitely have been another one of those secrets that they just didn't want us knowing about. Number 5 on this list is the relationship. As we'll look at a bit later in this video, Ed and Lorraine's relationship might not have been all it was cracked up to be. The couple that inspired The Conjuring have often been talked about as being one of the greatest married couples ever. In the movie The Conjuring, the pair very clearly have each other's back, and it's clear that there's a deep foundation of love between them. Or at least that's how the movie likes to show it. Real life may have been a lot different. Judith Penny was someone who would have had access to the Warrens' relationship and would have been able to see it behind closed doors. We'll get into why that is the case later and explain who Judith Penny is, but for now, just take my word for it. Apparently, she has come out and said that the Warrens' beautifully loving relationship that we saw on screen is all a bunch of baloney. In truth, Ed was extremely violent and toxic to Lorraine. This toxicity would manifest itself in many different forms. Oftentimes it would come out in harsh, verbal abuse that felt as if it was coming right from thin air, totally unprovoked by Lorraine. However, occasionally this would manifest into physical abuse. Judith has come out and said that one particularly bad evening she saw Ed backhand Lorraine across the face with all his might, and apparently she lost consciousness. Now Lorraine wouldn't just sit there and take the abuse either, she would fire her own shots as well. Judith thought that some evenings one of them wouldn't even be waking up the next morning based on how much they were fighting and how intense it would get. This has all the telltale signs of a horribly toxic relationship. The pair were just very good at hiding it. Number 4 on this list is the Amityville horror story. I feel like you've heard this story before, guys. Arguably the most famous of all the Ed and Lorraine Warren cases, this singular case launched the pair onto the main stage as being some of the biggest demonologists and paranormal investigators on the planet. Therefore, it was incredibly important to their image and their brand that this story was believed by the public. Fact of the matter is, though, they made the entire thing up. Ronald DeFeo Jr. was the spark behind this entire story. In 1974, Ronald gunned down his entire family in that home for seemingly no reason. He was later sentenced to life in prison for his crimes and died behind bars at age 69. These murders were brutal, though, and were heard nationwide. That's why when the next family to move in claimed the house was haunted, it actually got a ton of attention. The family said that slime would appear all over the place with no apparent origin. Things would swing open and objects would fly around the room. The house itself could simply not warm up and would stay incredibly cold for weeks on end. The media got wind of this, and so did Ed and Lorraine. They went into this place and went on to have their most successful case ever, ultimately concluding that the house is in fact haunted. However, this just simply was never true. The family's lawyer later came out and said that they collectively made up this story together and thought it would get a lot of traction over a few bottles of wine. The Warrens' initial success literally started by a few drunk people deciding they were going to pull a trick on everyone. Even though this news came out, the Warrens have always held strong onto the fact that the house was in fact haunted. Number 3 on this list is Judith Penny. Ed and Lorraine Warren were married right up until Ed died back in 2006. The couple had been together for a long time and shared quite the life together. I mean, think about all the crazy things that they did. I highly doubt that many people can say that they stopped ghosts around the world and became famous together. While they were at the height of their success, they looked like a power couple. A real duo that you wouldn't want to trifle with. Ed and Lorraine Warren together taking on the world one ghost or possession at a time. Well, during all of that, although it looked like it was just the two of them, there was actually a third. Judith Penny has come forward and said in a sworn statement that she had a relationship with Ed Warren for 4 whole decades. 4 decades where they were having an intimate relationship that the world had no idea about. Apparently, Judith moved into the Warren household when she was 15 years old back in 1963. Ed, who was in his mid-30s at the time, would sleep with her regularly, and Lorraine Warren was well aware of the entire thing. I mean, she obviously was, considering Judith literally lived with the pair in their own house. In fact, before Ed's big career of being a demonologist took off, it said that he would drive Judith's bus to school. How freaking creepy and gross is that, guys? Literally her school bus driver, but also her lover while she's 15 years old. This relationship apparently went on until 2003, 3 years before Ed finally passed away. Obviously, the Warrens didn't want any of this getting out to anyone and kept it very hush-hush. She even had to have when she became pregnant with Ed's child, and that was kept under wraps. What we thought was this power duo was actually a sick and twisted trio that we knew nothing about. The Warren family, before Lorraine died, came out and said that they had no knowledge of the alleged conduct. Number 2 on this list is the Lady in White. The Lady in White was a ghost that was said to haunt the Union Cemetery in Connecticut. This was another one of the Warrens' most famous cases and gained a ton of notoriety. Well, sorry to burst your bubble, guys, but it's fake. Let's roll a clip of what is supposed to be evidence of the Lady in White. So first off, where the hell is the ghost there, and how on earth did this qualify as proof? Like, frankly, I hardly see anything at all, but even if I did, guess who's behind it? Judith. Yeah, the girl that Ed had an illegal relationship with was the lady in white, literally dressed up in a sheet, and the pair took some grainy pictures and videos together and claimed it was evidence. Just another secret that the Warrens tried to hide, but eventually it's bubbled to the surface. And finally, number 1 on this list is the smoke and the mirrors. We've already talked about the Amityville horror house and the lady in white here and about how they're all fake. Well, guess what, folks? I hate to do this to you, but they ain't the only ones. Everything the Warrens did was just a bunch of smoke and mirrors. This mural haunting saw other experts come in and look at the space. Nothing was wrong with it. Some of the exorcisms they performed, those people weren't really possessed by the devil, they were mentally ill people that the Warrens were preying on. The whole story about how they cured someone of being a werewolf, like, that doesn't even make any sense. Smoke and mirrors. That's what the Warrens' career was. Now, that's not to say that they didn't inadvertently stumble upon something paranormal every now and again. I mean, if you believe in that sort of stuff, then they must have, based on how active they were in the community. But basically, a lot of our favorite stories that rocketed them to the top of the demonology community are completely fraudulent. I guess it's not the worst thing in the world to know that we aren't living among as many ghosts as the pair claim that we were.